debating. Give me a second. So, my first question is, do you believe in objectivity at all? Do you believe like that something as like objectivity exists at all?
Like outside of moral claims, yeah, sure.
Oh.
Okay. So that's the first thing that I guess I wanted to understand. This sounds like a really weird question, but why?
So, all right. So it depends on what we mean by objectivity. What's our working definition with objectivity? You want to define it for me?
I want you to define it actually, because I'm not sure what you mean by it. So I want you to tell me what is objectivity to you.
Okay. So objectivity, from my understanding, is something that we can prove to be objectively true through observation of the real world, right?
Okay. I have a problem with this kind of. If you believe that all moral... Okay, let me ask another question. Do you believe all moral claims are essentially subjective because you believe that they come back down to how we perceive them?
It's not just about perception, but yeah, I think all moral claims are subjective. Yeah.
Okay, what do you mean by not just perception? What else?
I think that moral claims are based off of what you choose to value, right? So they're based off of that.
Do moral statements have truth value?
Do moral statements have truth value? No. Wait, all right. So can you define truth value? Like, what do you mean by that?
Depends. You define it ultimately, because if you...
What the fuck is this game?
Well, no. If you think that they are true in any sort of way, I'd be curious to hear why. Or I'm just trying to see if you think that moral statements are just like an emotional expression. So when I say you shouldn't, kill a dog, that's just me expressing my emotional desire not to see that dog die, for example. That was the impression I got of your notion of morality, is that moral statements are just my personal expressions of my values and how I feel about something, but they aren't, true in any meaningful way.
Give me Saguna, this sleeps to me.
Okay, so you would say that they don't have a truth value then?
Yeah,
in that
zero truth value.
Okay, so let me then ask this. A statement like
Wait, I thought I was debating Pxie. What's going on?
Well, Rem and me have the same opinion, and you said like, okay, 2 versus 1, but that's okay.
So you were baiting me hard on Twitter. What's the issue?
Rem, this isn't
I'm not baiting you. I had no interest in talking to you, Rem.
Yeah.
Never did.
Wait, you just... Okay. I thought that you did because I asked.
Look, Rem can sit here and like spectate if he wants. He can like chime in when he thinks it's relevant. But I'm here to debate you, Pxie.
Mindwaves. That's okay.
I'll take you afterwards. How about that?
Sure.
You can have the sloppy seconds, Rem.
I have a question. So you don't believe that moral statements have truth value. You think that they're just a form of expressing your feelings, right?
It's not just about feelings to me. It's about values, what we choose to value.
Okay. And you do not believe that we can create moral statements are about things that we ought to do, right? You agree with that statement? And you think
if you're making a moral claim, that is definitionally like an ought claim, right?
Yeah. Yes, and I'm just clarifying. So moral statements are what we ought to do. If you believe there's no way that we can find a reality within there, an objective reality within what we ought to do, right?
So it depends what you mean by that. What do you mean?
I literally mean that you believe that there's no way to find an objective answer, an objective reality within the question what we ought to do.
So like, so what do you mean? So like the claim itself, or like the conclusion that you're making? Like I'm not sure where you're going with that. Like, could you give me an example?
Well, if I say humans ought to be kind to each other, you feel like there's no way to objectively prove that.
Well, I would say that the claim itself can't be proven objectively true, but if we accept that claim, right? If we accept that moral ought, then we can use like data and observations of the real world um to make claims about like what's the best way to go about doing that. Yeah.
So you believe that we can create frameworks and we can have an objective truth within these frameworks.
So like, okay, so if I was to say that like, so if I was to make the moral claim that we ought not murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
That statement in and of itself is not objective in any way, right? But if we accept it to be true, we can make objective claims like on how to go about that, like about how to like go about that moral ought, right?
Okay, so my main problem is if you believe that this is all ultimately subjective, I do not understand how you can believe in an objective reality. Right? Like this whole idea is that, oh, since it's essentially starting from a human perspective, it is essentially subjective. But to me, when I hear that sentence, I think, well, you can apply that for anything. Literally, the moon, the stars, what I see in front of me, my computer, must first be perceived through me, a subjective, like a being who has subjective thoughts. My perception is subjective. So I cannot possibly understand how you can believe in an objective reality if it must first go through this subjective perception.
So there's a term for this. Fuck, what's the name of it? The idea that the only thing that you can know to be true is that you're experiencing
solipsism.
Something. Solipsism. Yeah. So I don't know where my position lies on solipsism. I think that obviously our perception is flawed, so the way that we look through the universe can be flawed, oftentimes is. But I think that despite like the human errors in observation, we can still make objective claims about the universe through other means, like, I don't know, science,
but how?
math, like logical statements like 2 + 2 = 4, shit like that, right?
I perhaps agree with you on logical statements, but when you say things like science, math, all these things that we measure still must go through our human perception first. It basically goes to the whole we might be in an AI simulation argument. Like there's literally no way to prove that it's not just our perception is reality. So when you make statements like, oh, objective reality is a thing because we can measure it, because we can look at outside forces, I answer back with, well, then there is no real outside force that you can prove beyond what your human perception is. Now, if you say,
okay,
well...
Okay, so maybe I'll modify my statement. So I do believe that science can't really, like, even though we can say that gravity exists, for instance, because of the physics behind it, etc. Doesn't mean that like we know that to be like objectively true. Like I think that science is an approximation to truth, not an absolute truth, if that makes sense, right?
Well, no, I don't feel like that makes sense, because what would make it an approximation than just nothing? Like Because, how can you say, oh, this is approximately to the truth, when in reality we might just all be part of a giant AI? That doesn't seem to make sense.
Well, exactly. This is why I think that solipsism is really dumb. Like like even if we accept solipsism, if we acted as rational beings under the sort of assumption that like if we operated as solipsists from day to day, society would crumble, right? Like we have to believe that we are experiencing something that is objective to be able to have any sort of like meaningful like experience or like meaningful like interaction with other people and stuff like that, right?
So then you believe that even though something is within our perception, we can still find truth within it.
You should clarify by what you mean by true. It's important.
Right, exactly.
Well, I
For
guess
both of you.
reality.
Huh?
We can find reality within it, or we should not treat it any differently than what reality might be. You might as well
What do
just
you mean
say
by
yes.
reality? How do you determine what is reality?
Well, I would argue that our reality would be the experiences that we have in the world.
Well, so we can experience something that nobody else experiences, right? Like a schizophrenic can have delusions and like hallucinations. That doesn't mean that those hallucinations are true or like objectively exist, right? Like
That's an absolutely true point. So how would you define truth?
how would I define truth? I'm not sure I believe in absolute truths.
Okay, so then would you take that? Why would you believe in any truth, period, if it all might be false?
Because I think that there's utility in agreeing on something as being true, like socially, societally, right?
But to me, that's confusing, right? So you're agreeing on something that's true even though it isn't true, or it might not.
Because there's utility in that. Like
You
we
guys
can
should
all
define
agree
what
that,
you
like,
both mean when you say true. It sounds really pedantic, but like this is kind of what you
true.
guys are arguing about, right?
Yeah. So like, how do you discover truth other than whatever you subjectively experience?
Well, that's the point that I'm trying to make. That if you believe that there's like two layers of belief here, I guess. You have the belief that even though we filter reality through our perceptions, it doesn't make it invalid automatically. Just because it's through a perception does not make it an invalid
Sure.
statement.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
But it doesn't make it objectively true either, right? Like,
I mean, not all the time. There's exceptions for sure.
like what?
But like the schizophrenic example you gave. However, until we're given evidence to point otherwise, that our reality is false, we might as well not treat it that way. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Reiterate?
So until we are given evidence otherwise, that our perceptions are false, we should not treat it as false, or we should not treat it as...
Sorry.
So we should accept things to be true unless proven false, is what you're saying?
Unless given evidence otherwise, yes.
So, okay.
I
So-
think we're lost in the weeds here a bit.
Yeah, I'm not. Like, I'm trying to tie this back to the original dispute, and I'm not sure.
I mean, I can see exactly where Pixie's trying to go. It's just it's hard to.
Throw
I
me
think-
a rope, Rem. Run, take my hand and walk me through it. What's up?
Well, no, because Pixie's giving a different argument than I would, right? Pixie's giving an epistemic argument. So reading chat, I mean, the casual sexism saying, you know, that I'm PMing her and stuff is quite interesting, because the argument that Pxie's giving right now is one that I'm familiar with, but not one that I've ever actually given.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a sexist argument. You guys were talking right before the conversation. I think it's reasonable to assume that some information sharing has happened, right?
There was a training arc going there a little bit.
No, but
No, you can look at the pod.
You can look at the, and the argument that
I was
Pxie's
watching
giving right
it
now
live.
is
What do
not
you mean,
mine.
no? All right, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
Can I try discussing with you, Mindwave, if that's okay, Pxie?
I mean, yeah, I can pick up my argument afterwards as long as I have notes written down for it. You're fine.
Hit me with it, Rem.
So I noticed in your discussion you said solipsism is wrong because of the bad effects of it, right? Like if
Yeah.
everyone were to be solipsist, then, you know, society
You wouldn't
would
have a
crumble.
coherent society, yeah.
Right. So essentially you are invoking
Pee-pee
morality
wee-wee.
as a refutation of solipsism.
Um,
You're begging the question.
yeah, that we ought not be solipsist or act like solipsist because of the implications, yeah.
So you acknowledge that absolutely everything is ultimately, nothing has truth value. Because if moral statements
True.
don't have truth value, as you said, then nothing has truth value.
True.
So you're a complete nihilist about everything. You are the ultimate skeptic. And in fact,
True.
if we work within your framework, I could flip a coin right now, and if I get heads, then you're wrong about everything.
Sure. But like this is the thing, is that I think that
It's called
Despite
lazy.
being-
This is called being lazy in philosophy.
no,
you,
this is
you reject everything. You don't make a single positive claim. There's not a single positive claim that you could possibly make right now. You've literally dug yourself into a hole.
well, no,
and
I
there's
can
nothing
make,
that
I,
you can
no,
say.
no, 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 no. This is the thing, is that
Mhm.
I can make moral claims,
Yeah.
right? But I can't prove my moral claims to be objectively true.
But you same thing with 2 + 2 = 4 under this, because if nothing is true, then I can say that 2 + 2 = 3, and you have no way to refute me otherwise.
Sure, and it could, if we all accepted that it is. Then it
But
could
even
be.
that statement itself,
Kurchak Norris, wait, which free life in the building where the heart was? Can you describe that more?
the statement you
What do you-
just
what do you-
made has a truth value.
What do you mean?
Your statement that, you know, it possibly could be 3, or that itself has a truth value. Any statement that you give to me right now doesn't have a truth value. There is no truth value. Any of the
Yeah,
statements-
why do you value, like, why do we have to have a truth value? Why do we have to be able to prove something to be objectively true in order to make moral claims? I don't believe that to be
assume-
true.
I assume you understand me, right? Like, we are capable of communicating with each other. There is meaning to the things that we say, right? Like the words that I'm using, you understand.
Sure, but they're only because we both have come to a subjective.
But how can you say that? How can you say that if nothing has a truth value? How can you make these claims about the social makeup?
Well, I believe it to be true.
How can you say that you believe it to be true? That itself requires a truth statement as well. That requires a truth value to say that you believe something. So this is what I'm trying to show, is that your position leads to complete absurdity, because everything that you possibly say doesn't have a truth value, including the fact that nothing has a truth value. It's self-refuting. It's a complete absurdity, and it's lazy philosophy. Anyone can do this. My grand can do this. So how do you dig yourself out of the hole?
You don't?
Right.
What do you
okay.
mean?
Well, you know, if you want to acknowledge that, you know, absolutely everybody, you know, everything that everyone says has no truth value, Nazis are ultimately just as legitimate as, you know, a Democrat. You have no way to refute that. 2 + 2 = 3. That's fine. 2 + 2 = 97. That's fine. And you
I
have
mean,
no
a
way to ever
neo-Nazi,
refute
a
these
neo-Nazi isn't a yeah. I absolutely like. So this is the misunderstanding I'm having here, is I don't understand how, like, okay, so even if we can't even if we can't prove without a doubt that something is objectively true,
Mhm.
why is it flawed logic to say that we can't make moral claims?
Because that statement, the statement that you make when you say that we can't make, like literally the statement, moral statements don't have truth value. That is a claim that you make, right? That's a true or false claim, but nothing is true. So your own claim is false. So you've refuted yourself.
Well, no, it's true. Like, okay, so like,
what do you
this is the
mean?
thing.
Is there
so
true?
we
Is
can
there not truth?
Well, it
You
depends
can't
on
have
what
it
we
both
mean
ways,
by truth.
right?
So one of the things that's confusing
is there
here is that-
subjective truth or objective truth or absolute truth?
Yeah,
Like,
so
what do you mean by
one
that?
of the things that you're getting really hung up on is that Rem will conflate like what you mean by true into like
No,
50
I
million different
offer-
things that are no, because
Let's be very
what
clear,
you're doing when you
Destiny.
say like is something true, like did Harry kill Voldemort? Like is that true? Well, kind of, but is it objectively true? Like you're using you're conflating like 15 different definitions of
I'm
true
not
together.
conflating. I asked
Absolutely.
him to define it. Under any sense of truth that he wants, this remains the case.
Yeah,
Well,
but you can still have a meaningful conversation.
Is
about...
Mindwaves not capable of defending his own claims?
I'm sorry.
Again,
is
somebody,
Pixie
wait,
not
hold,
capable
wait,
of
hold on.
defending
Yeah, you
herself?
can't
What are
really.
you talking
yeah,
about,
you can't
right?
really.
Can I bring up my? I can go back to my argument if you want. I have it waiting.
Yeah,
if you
wait,
just wanted to have
Pixie's doing a
discussion.
different argument than I am.
Yeah, but I think Pixie's argument is more fruitful because your argument convinces literally nobody. Like the definition of morality that you use, nobody on the face of the earth, even
Mindwaves had
ethicists,
no
even
response to
people.
it.
Yeah, because he's working with more conventional definitions. Even in the literature, nobody refers to morality the way that you do. The idea that every single
What are you
normative statement is
talking about?
morality. Just
You're
what I
completely
said.
incorrect.
Then bring in Marty. Marty is. I've talked to Marty about this before. Like your idea that like well morality is just all normativity. All normativity is morality. Nobody believes that. Nobody uses that word like that. If you were to be clear about that, if you were to be clear about that to Mindwaves would probably agree. Oh well, sure. If every single normative thing ever requires morality, then I guess that type of morality exists. But that's not the type of morality he's talking about. We're talking about like good or evil. That's it. Not normativity. Period.
What does it mean for something to be good, Destiny?
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. That's a deep meta ethics question, my dude.
Like, look.
That's a meta ethics question. What do you mean? What is goodness? Like
your favorite source, Wikipedia. We can figure out what good is. Like, just any context of good, whatever you want to define it as. If something is good, then by very
hold on.
definition,
I
we
know
ought to
that
tend
you
towards
did
it.
in the middle of a philosophy discussion just appeal to a dictionary definition of good when this is
It's a
literally
joke.
like okay, because it was incredibly fucking stupid
Good
to say
one,
that
Ram.
when that's literally like the idea
No,
of what is
point
goodness is like what all
okay.
meta ethics is about. Like how are you going to sit here and ask me like, well, I dictionaried it like.
Let's ask.
Can I wait? The reason why I said let's consult a dictionary is because good is by definition. We can analyze the concept of good, and it'll come out as different.
Is the
things.
definition objectively true?
Can I
Ram?
finish what I was going to say? Ultimately, no matter how we analyze goodness, it's always related to what we ought to do. Just by definition, you can't have something be good and then not also have a moral imperative.
Yeah, but the thing is,
to
you're
tend towards
conflating
it.
two different types of oughts that no one else in the world does.
What are the two different types of oughts?
There is most people recognize there's a fundamental difference between like you ought not murder someone or you ought to treat your neighbor kindly versus you ought to fill a cup, a 10-liter cup, 5 liters in order to fill it halfway full. But that
I'm
normative
more
statement and
than
that moral
happy to
statement are two
discuss
fundamentally
with
different
you
things.
again.
What?
I'm more than happy to have this discussion with you because we've talked about this many times.
Yeah,
But
and
I
this is
was
this
talking
point
to
that we always
Mindwaves
end.
about it.
Well, you're
So
not
if-
talking to Mindwaves. You're just here to ambush him with philosophy questions you know that he can't answer in order to make a point. You're not interested in the conversation at all.
So if he's not capable of having the discussion, then fine. But I
Well,
will.
no. Okay, Rem. There's a difference between being able to have the conversation and asking you to walk me.
We can
through
have it
it,
as
because
we
these
can
are
have it as
concepts I've
many.
never
Look, I'll define as
tackled
many
before.
terms as you want, Mindwaves. One-on-one. We can.
I asked you to define truth.
Absolutely. I can any sense of truth that you want. We could define it as correspondence. We could say that something is
Wait.
true if it corresponds. To
Wait,
something
Rem,
in
are
the
you on
world.
Wikipedia
Whatever you
again?
want,
Wait.
Mindwaves.
Okay. Hold on. When you say correspondence, I have no idea what the fuck you mean.
He's talking
Are
about
you
he's talking about theories
subjective
of truth
Are
right
we
now.
talking
No,
about
no.
objective truth?
No, it's way more complicated than that. This is like you're fucked.
Yeah, this is the issue, right? You're not capable of having a discussion, so Destiny has to come in here and attempt to
Okay,
save
but like
your ass.
Pixie's probably not
okay.
capable of having like this level of ethics. Like most people aren't, right?
Look, this is what I talked to Pixie about. Pixie's not as familiar with meta-ethical literature as I am, right?
Sure, but the problem between these two is never.
Can I finish my statement?
yeah.
Okay. My fundamental. This is what I'm talking about with Pixie. These types of discussions are not at all conducive to Twitch, right? They aren't, and I think it's highly ridiculous for someone like Mindwaves, who doesn't know anything about the subject, to be discussing it or to be calling people out and acting smug like they know absolutely.
Would you say
how
the
moral
same thing about
anti-realism is
Pixie,
true.
Rem?
I would say
Or
Pixie-
anybody else? Anybody else besides you?
What do you mean?
I think it's pretty
Destiny
clear.
is capable of discussing meta
Barely.
ethics because we've had. Yeah, I mean, not as much as someone like Marty is, right? Pxie has studied, like, I just had a conversation about this with Pxie, and we were able to converse about it. She wasn't as familiar with the literature as I was, and I think that, frankly, the way that she discussed it with you was not great. She knows that. She knows that I think that whole discussion...
Well, sure. So the whole point was just for them to have another discussion about it, where they're both treating each other like human beings. They're trying to, like, Mindwave's dunking on Pxie, right, or people screaming at each other or whatever, right?
But at the end of the day, Mindwaves doesn't know what the fuck is going on, and Pxie,
neither does Pxie.
Doesn't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what the fuck are you talking about, Rem?
Okay,
like,
wait. Okay, two things. First of all, when it comes to the whole thing of like, oh, Rem is like white knighting, he's sending like messages about what
argument is different.
Oh god,
no.
Nobody.
What do you mean nobody? I just got like
literally everyone in DJ. I've gotten PMs on Discord.
Why are you looking at chat during this debate? Like, that's the number one mistake of a debate. What the fuck?
Okay, but...
Okay, hold on, wait. I'm calling a moratorium on this. Okay, listen. I think that Pxie and Mindwaves can have a discussion, and that those two should have a discussion. And it shouldn't be, here is Rem to ask Mindwaves what his theory of truth is. I think that if these two want to have a discussion...
Because you acknowledge Mindwaves isn't capable of having the meta.
Yeah, but nobody is capable of... I'm not capable of having this discussion at this level. 100%.
Then why are we having this? Then?
Because whether or not you're capable of having it, people still have some notion of what is true. People still have some notion of what is good, even if they're not a studied philosopher.
Rem, should only people that have a degree in philosophy engage in philosophy?
In front of thousands and thousands of people, were the outcome of a decision that... of a position that you take in this field is going to influence people in the way that they interact with the world.
Oh no! If I convince somebody to be a moral anti-realist, could you imagine what damage they could do in society? Oh my god, that would be terrifying.
Quite literally, and the fact that you are incapable of defending yourself against that is the primary issue. You think that my claim about moral anti-realism is ridiculous, and yet when push comes to shove, you can't defend your position for shit.
Not against you, of course not.
Of course, but that's what matters. If you are going to go on a platform and say absolutely that my position is true or not, you should be able to fucking defend it against someone who actually knows what they're talking about. This is why flat earthers should not be platformed on Twitch.
I disagree that this is of the same level
objectively true, Rem? I'm not sure about that one. Are you qualified to have this conversation, Rem? I'm not sure.
Of saying whether it's true or not, because you don't believe in truth, apparently.
Okay, So are they not allowed to have a discussion? Are you here to police my stream?
No, they can have a discussion. Okay. I'm just saying that I think it's irresponsible to platform someone like...
Okay, I accept... Listen, I'm going to go ahead and accept the fallout from anybody in chat taking a different epistemic approach to morality, okay? I will bear the brunt of that responsibility, okay? Yes, I am brave.
That's fine, okay. And as long as you acknowledge that Mindwaves is not capable of discussing the subject with anyone who has read something on the matter.
Yeah, of course. I'm not either, but sure,
As long as you acknowledge he's the literal equivalent of a flat earther.
No, I don't think he is the literal equivalent of the flat earther.
Okay. Why not?
Because I think that there's a difference in terms of what level of engagement you need to have with a subject. Hold on, fuck. Okay, there's a difference between like the level of engagement that you need with the subject to make that claim. That like whether or not you are a flat earther is pretty easy to figure out whether or not you should be. Most reasonable people we can expect should have access to the information, not be a flat earther. Whether or not you can have a detailed conversation about epistemology and meta-epistemology and ethics, that's like a whole other different ballpark.
I agree. Actually, I think what's required to have a discussion about meta-ethics is a lot higher than
of course.
To talk about whether the globe is.
But I think the stakes are a bit lower when it comes to that.
I would disagree.
Okay.
Mindwaves
that's because you think philosophy is like the #1 issue in the fucking world. You think it's like the single most important thing ever. Yeah, and I disagree. It's really not. Nobody gives a shit about moral philosophy in their day-to-day lives.
Okay, you can keep going in circles. I mean, I think even Destiny would disagree with you because at the fundamental root of what you just said is a philosophical claim. The claim about what is important and what is not is itself philosophical.
The thing is that people can practice philosophy without knowing anything about it. That's the whole point. That's the whole...
Well, I can practice science without knowing anything about it.
It's a lot harder to do that. It's a lot... No, it's a lot harder to do that. Don't even grant that. Not every person can walk into a car factory and start making... Yeah, you can practice math if you want. Sure, yeah.
Absolutely. But we're not going to listen to someone who has never read a calculus textbook. Instead, we'll talk to people who have actually studied mathematics instead of someone who has the equivalence of a first grader in mathematics.
Yeah, but the mathematic claims aren't things that we're because mathematical claims aren't things that are usually relevant to our everyday lives. Like they're not like hotly contested in the same way that like ethical claims are.
What do you mean? We use math every single day of our lives.
Okay, I can see the whole argument. You're right. Nobody except for literally the most studied philosophers of all time. By the way, this excludes you because you're still just an undergrad. So even you're irresponsibly engaged in this conversation here. Okay, so there you go. Nobody's allowed to have it. I take full responsibility of it. And then, okay.
To be on
yes,
this platform.
I agree. Rem is very irresponsible.
It's so irresponsible.
Okay, go. Okay, now let Pxie and Mindwaves, let them just have their conversation.
But in response to that, I actually agree with you on a lot of subjects. On the topic of like the companions and guilt argument, I feel confident enough in having read most of the literature in that area to discuss it. With almost all
I feel confident not having read a single fucking book. There we go.
Okay.
Destiny. But in respect to almost every other area of philosophy, you're right. I don't make positive claims in those areas, and you know that. I don't talk about almost every other area of philosophy except the ones that I've actually read a lot in. That's literally something I talk about all the time. So that claim is, like, obviously, I agree with you.
Okay, cool. All right. Can Pxie and Mindwaves have a wonderful discussion now?
So,
Where do you want to take this, Pxie?
Okay, hold on, wait. Firstly, can we just, everybody just take a deep breath, have a little reset, okay? Are we all okay? Everybody feels okay? I need to hear verbal confirmation from both of you. You guys are both doing okay. Pxie?
Yeah, I'm chill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mindwaves.
Yes.
I need to hear it a little bit more jovially.
Yes.
Okay, good enough. Okay, go.
Okay, so I don't want to be too slow on this, but I just really want to make sure that we have our basics together. So again, you believe in objective reality, yes or no?
What do you mean by objective reality?
Well, I'm using the definition that you use, that things that can be measured outside of us. Unless I will use whatever definition of objective reality you want to use. Actually,
Okay, let's all come to an agreement. When we say objective reality, what do you guys mean? Mindwaves, what is your idea of an objective reality? Or I can suggest a definition, and then you guys could tell me if you agree or disagree. We can go from there.
I will use whatever definition you guys want to use.
Okay, I'll put forth my definition of objective reality. Mindwaves, you can accept or reject it or modify it, okay? Sure. So when someone says objective reality to me, what I'm thinking is that if every single human being were to disappear, this is a feature of the world that would still exist. All humans could go away, and this thing would exist independent of the conception of any human. So like a mountain, one might argue, if all humans disappear, that mountain is still there, and it will always be there because it's a feature of the world. It's objective reality, and that's a knowable thing or whatever. That's what I would say is objective reality. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah. It's true outside the observation of humans. Yeah.
Okay, that's his definition of objective morality then.
Okay. So you see, my problem with that is that that's a claim that we can actually never know, because all the information we ever have and we will ever gain is through our own perception.
Well, doesn't that defeat your argument that you can never make an objective claim about anything?
Well,
Wouldn't
no,
that mean
I'll
everything's
get there.
subjective?
Wait, careful.
based
So
on
hold
our
on, wait, real
experience?
quick, just to clarify. So she didn't say that. She said you said that, right? She does believe that things are knowable, I believe, right? Because she would be the realist. So she's asking you if you don't think you could know if there's an objective reality or whatever. How can you say anything about anything? Does that make sense? Sorry, that was kind of confusing.
Yeah, I mean, sure. If we accept the fact that the human experience is flawed, that like we have no way of being able to observe things without experiencing them first, sure, we can't know things to be objectively true. Then, yeah.
Okay, but yet you think that that we shouldn't live with this mind frame or work with this mind frame, because essentially it would mean that our whole life is subjective and we shouldn't treat anything as truth. Something like, oh, the moon is made out of cheese wouldn't be even a statement that we could say is false, because hey, everything's from our perception and we have no way of proving something outside of our perception.
Well, no, because my perception, my understanding, my experience with cheese, I know what that to me, I know what that is, right? We can go ahead and through observational skills look at the moon, observe what the surface of the moon actually consists of, and we can say, all right, this isn't the same as what I know cheese to be.
But the point that I'm trying to make here is that since at the end of the day, it's something through your perception, there is actually no way for you to claim that the moon actually isn't cheese. Like, it's just literally an impossible thing to do.
Objectively, like, absolutely, sure.
But you still agree that it's kind of useless to view life like that. That we don't gain anything from that.
Yeah, it is useless to be hyper skeptical of every single perception about the observable universe. Yeah.
Okay, good.
There's no utility in that. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm really happy you agree with that. So,
Why?
well, I'm about to explain.
Okay.
So, when it comes to morality, we can argue, or what you were arguing is that ultimately, if you trace it back long enough, it ends up with claims that are a result of perception.
Wait, I'm
Claims
sorry,
are a
Pixie. Could
result
you
of
repeat that one more
perception?
time? The Vega was talking in my game. I'm so sorry.
That when we were talking about it the other day, your argument about everything about morality being subjective is that ultimately it's because it comes from human perception.
That what comes from human perception? I'm sorry.
Morality.
I mean, it must. Where else does it come from?
Okay. So I just don't understand that if you agree that, perhaps like there isn't an objective reality, but it doesn't make sense to view the world through that lens, so we might as well act as if we have an objective reality and work towards finding those truths in the universe, even though it's technically, it might technically be all subjective. I do not understand why we cannot do that with morality.
Because because you can't. Like, how could you?
Okay, so hold on.
The
So
burden of proof would be
yeah.
on you to
So
to
what
prove that
Pixie's
you could
saying is that
objectively
what Pixie's saying is that do you believe the moon is any more real than goodness? Because the question,
real.
yeah. So the next question from that is going to be, if you say, I imagine you would say, well, yeah, I think the moon is more real than goodness can be. So Pixie is going to ask you, okay, well, if you think that you're filtering things through your subjective human experience, and you can't truly know if the moon is real, but you treat it as though it's real, why can't we do something similar with a concept like morality?
Because I don't think that you can. Well, okay, so because there's observations we can make about the moon. There's ways that we can, like, we have methods to be able to like prove that it does exist based on.
What do you mean by prove it exists?
Understanding of the. Well, we can. Okay, so we can observe that like there is a celestial body hovering around the Earth, right? We can observe that. We can observe like a number of other different factors about the moon, right?
Sure,
And
that's
we
fair.
can say like, okay, and we can say that like, okay, so these observations exist, right? Whether or not it objectively exists outside of how I'm experiencing them, I feel like is a different like question, right? But like, as long as we all agree that we are experiencing the same thing, that we're observing the same thing, we can say that this is subjectively true based on our collective experience or understanding or observations about this moon, right?
So I don't understand why you can't make the same claim with morality.
Well, how would you?
Well, we can say, hey, or that's where we create frameworks where we agree within, right? And we say that there's truth within those frameworks. So let's take Kantian or like the ontology for an example. We create a framework that humans ought to or have a duty to each other, and we ought to operate within that framework. And within that, we can find a supposed like objective truth. Now, technically,
sure, but aren't you already making an ought claim that we should look through this specific type of lens?
Well, yes, But the point that
Well,
I'm trying
well,
to
how do you
well,
how do you
let me
how do you prove
let me
that that
finish.
claim is objectively true though?
Well, that's why I'm going. Let me finish. So this is the thing. Even though you could technically make the claim, hey, you know what? Like this whole framework at the end of the day, it goes back to because I feel like that's good, or I feel like it should be that way, because of your human subjective experience. You could still make that argument with literally anything else in reality. But if we agree that, hey, you know what, that's not a very valuable way to go through the world, and it doesn't really create any new knowledge or useful information, we might as well try to study it. We might as well try to find data about it and then create these frameworks that we use to interpret reality. So I'm saying you can do this if you like, you can do the same exact thing with morality. So
Well,
just like how you can argue
okay.
that technically your perception of the moon is a subjective experience, we still do not act that way because it brings no value.
Okay, so sure, but like, okay, so if your argument is that we can so you're saying that like we can, if we assume a certain sort of ethical framework to work within, then we can make truth claims based off of that framework that we lay out. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so.
Okay.
Now,
So you're presupposing that that framework that we're working in is objective.
I'm presupposing that you can objectively get, if you work within that framework, there are objective truths that you can get within it. And I know that sounds
Sure,
very
but-
confusing, so let
Well,
me clarify.
it's not. Well, I don't think it's very confusing. I think I understood what you meant. But the thing is that you're already presupposing that the framework that you're working in is objective, right? You're choosing to work within a framework based on your subjective evaluation.
Just like,
right? Like
any science or any way that we interact
exactly.
with the world.
So ultimately, morality depends on what framework that you're choosing to work in.
Well,
right?
no
But, like,
more than our reality itself. That's the argument that I'm trying to make. That you can be technical about it and say, hey, you know what? Like, technically, the moon is also a subjective experience, but it does not.
I mean, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, but you even admitted it yourself that it doesn't make sense to actually view the world in that light. So we might as well not treat it that way.
True. So we make arguments for why my observation of the moon is correct, and we come together societally, collectively, and we agree on a certain definition, a certain observation of the moon. We agree that there is truth in it together, right? That doesn't mean that like everything that it doesn't mean that all those claims are objectively true. Just because you choose to work within a moral framework, even if everybody like agrees to it, doesn't mean that that framework is objectively true.
So I don't think you got the first message that I was trying to say.
All right, hold on. I gotta pee really bad. Can you give me like 2 minutes?
Yeah, go for it.
1 second.
Okay, now I'm gonna start shit talking Mindwave. No, I'm joking.
Dude, fucking go for it. Oh shit, you're fucked up.
Destiny, can you try the fucking auto turret that you got?
Why, dude? I'm fucking. This shotgun is godstinny, dude.
I want to see the auto turret.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, you little cuck. Rem was being super calm. Rem was not being calm. Rem was just in here to dunk on fucking Mindwaves. And after Mindwaves' conversation with Pxie yesterday, all I did was I walked in at Mindwaves, I shouted at him for saying, there's no point in having a conversation like this. We're trying to dunk on somebody. The only reason Rem was in here was to dunk on somebody. That's it. That's not a productive conversation. Whether the people are like ultra well versed in the material or not. That's not really the point. Okay.
What? Rem wanting attention?
No, chill, stop. Okay, what am I looking for? Oh, okay, hold on. These challenges. Overload his shield with the plasma vertical 16. Oh, it doesn't have to be at once. Thank God. And then destroy. Oh, these are easy. These are so easy. 15 prowlers. Kill these students with a single heat blast 30 times. Just because in the back of his mind he would have liked to dunk on someone doesn't mean the conversation in a vacuum could have kept up intellectually on. Pogus Champus. There is nothing intellectually honest about being like, you're not qualifying how this debate. Irresponsible. That has nothing to do. You're not having a conversation on the subject matter. You're making it an ad hom about the person's qualifications to have a conversation. If you want to have a broader conversation about what is the responsibility to platform like people of a certain level of knowledge, that's fine. But like sitting here and shitting on somebody's credentials has nothing to do with like having a good conversation. It's completely opposite. I'm sorry. Okay, you guys go.
All right.
Hi.
What's up?
So, what I was establishing before, if you agree that in our real world, or that in our world, we shouldn't treat it as just everything might be subjective, there's no real way to interpret reality, I do not understand why we cannot have the same position when it comes to morality.
So I would say, well, you can pretend that your morals are objective, but like you can't prove them to be so, right?
So
I don't think that there's any utility in pretending like your moral claims or any sort of moral claim is objectively true.
Don't you wait? Can I ask a question about that? Don't you think there might be some utility in terms of being able to say like, oh, like laws are based on real morals? Don't you think there might be a little bit of like utility there? Like for instance, if two people propose a law, one person says it ought to be legal to murder, and another person says it ought not to be legal to murder. Don't you think there might be some utility in terms of like which law we craft?
Well, even then, I don't think that you could make a. You can't make like you can make an appeal towards like why murder is wrong. You can, but like you can't like prove it to be objectively true or objectively morally.
Yeah, so your definition for objectively true seemed to be that it yielded some amount of utility.
Wowie.
So Pxie's trying to draw parallels between like say physics and math, right? We could say that 1 + 1 = 2. We could say that 1 + 1 = 3. But it seems like both of you would agree that saying 1 + 1 = 3 is kind of foolish, even if we could, because there's no utility there. So we agree that 1 + 1 = 2. So we choose like a framework that better suits us as humans, and then we apply that. We take math and we apply that through physics, and then through chemistry, and then through engineering. So Pxie's making a similar argument for morality, that we can agree that while murder could be right, doesn't serve us much good, or murder could be wrong. Now we have that rule. Now we can apply that through the framework of law and punishment, right? Similar to how we would take math and apply it through like physics and engineering. So she's asking why these two things aren't comparable. What makes these fundamentally different from one another?
I have no idea.
You can talk through it if you've never. So not many people go like this deep into like an ethics conversation, but if you can just start like thinking about, well, why does it feel different? Why does one feel wrong? Because obviously one feels wrong to you. It must. So that feeling either comports with some like idea or intuition that you have, which ironically is where people say morality comes from, or there's some reasoning that you just have to think a little bit more about to figure out why you believe that to be true. But yeah, that's.
Because I mean, we can leave it here until you can find a reason.
Well, hold on, because I actually don't know where we're at. So like, what is the question being proposed?
So basically, you're saying what your claim was before was, hey, you know what? The reason why we treat the world as objective, or even though it might technically, theoretically not be, is because it provides some utility. And I'm basically saying the same thing can be applied to morality, that we should not just treat it as something fundamentally subjective when it's not any more subjective than technically anything else in the world.
No. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the first claim is that we agree to treat the world as like we agree to treat the world as if it has objective truths because it creates utility, and then the second claim is that we treat morality as being objective because it creates utility. Is that what we're saying?
Well, that's not necessarily what I personally believe. I'd have to think a little bit more about that. But the point that I believe is, since I personally don't see a difference between the subjectivity of the world and the subjectivity of morality, I might as well treat them as objectively as possible. I might as well just treat them as part of reality. So since you made this distinction between them at utility, but then again, how it, like, do you really not find any utility within treating morality as a real thing?
Well, well, it depends on what you mean by morality as a real thing. Like,
Well,
so
As
so,
real, when she says
like,
a real thing, she means as real as you say like math or physics is. That's what she means when she says real. So whatever your definition of math and physics would be being real, she would use that to apply that to morality. She wants to know, why do you think physics or math is more real than some sort of like moral reasoning? Right there. That's what the fuck I'm talking about. Get these motherfuckers out of here. Sorry. Kicking ass. In my video game, sorry.
Use the fucking auto turret.
Why? Dude, this gun is so good. I'm so good.
Apparently, it's really good for killing a lot.
Okay, damn.
So I don't know. I think that, like, because I think that all of this is like, I don't know. I don't believe in objective truth. So like
I mean, if you don't believe in objective truth, why make any claim of anything ever?
well, I mean, I guess I should say like absolute truth. Like I don't know. Fuck, dude. I fucking hate philosophy. Let's see.
It's
I
okay
don't
to
know.
take.
What do you
It's
think,
okay to
Pxie?
take a break here and be like, oh yeah, I'll think about this more. I do this all the time, especially with philosophy, because this shit is fucking confusing. But
Well,
I
the thing
think
is
maybe
that
it can
I'm
be.
never gonna look this up because I really don't give a shit.
Well,
But
that's okay.
I like the
but at the
conversation.
very least, then we don't have to like be mean and subtweet each other and say that we're fucking retarded to each other, right? If we're.
I never did that.
Ah.
Never.
I'm just
I
like
attacked
talking
your
to a
arguments,
theist.
Pxie. Every single attack against you was about your arguments.
Arguing with
not you.
anti-realists is the same thing as arguing with people that are theologists. That's kind of a like.
I didn't say that. I said
You
that, like,
wait. Hold
I said
on.
ar-
What
it
was the
feels
tweet?
Like arguing with the
Oh, it
theist, okay?
feels like it. Okay. So if I were to tell you that, like, you feel like a mean, vindictive cunt, someone's like, "Whoa, why would you call me?" I was like, "Why didn't you say you were a mean, vindictive?" I said, "You feel like one."
No, because that's a value statement. I'm not applying a value statement to theists or fucking like moral realists.
But there's
okay?
a clear connotation there.
Is there? Maybe.
It kind of is, right? Arguing with X is just like arguing with Y. When the purpose is to show that arguing with X is exhausting, then Y is used as something that most people commonly understand to be something stupid, like theology, right?
Sure. Yes. Okay. You could take that. Yeah, you could take that away from that tweet. Sure. Just say sorry, bro. I'm not saying sorry. Fuck that shit. That's beta shit.
What's that?
Beta.
Good job, Dan, leading the way.
I do what I can. Hey, Rem's giving you some tweets
I just
there,
this
Steve.
this whole argument feels bad because I feel like the entirety of the burden of proof is being put on me. When I feel like when you're the one claiming objectivity, the burden of proof should be on you.
Well, no. So she's not really claiming objectivity. So I don't think she's actually made any positive claims at all. Actually, we haven't even gotten to that part of the discussion. The question is that how can you say like you believe like if somebody were to come up to you and say like I think that math and like physics and engineering, I think those are all like real objective reality or whatever, like you probably wouldn't laugh at them and make fun of them. But when somebody says morality, I think that's real and objective, you'd be like, dude, you're so stupid. And then the question is, well, why do you feel that way about morality but not that way about things like math? That's the question. What's the difference? And then teasing out that difference gets you the answer of why you think that like there's a fundamental difference between like reality, which is what you call, you know, like physics and math, versus morality. Because Pxie is probably going to make the argument that there is no difference between the two. That seems to be what she's getting at. But right now she's trying to figure out why you think there's a difference between the two. It doesn't seem like we have like a really clear line of reasoning to explain why. What is that? Specialized in large kind of area of denial. Jesus.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's something I would have to think about.
Okay. Because Yeah, basically, I see no difference between them, so I just treat both of them as, you know, objective to me, or I just treat them both as reality. That's, I guess, a better argument or phrasing or word
Well,
to
do you,
use.
do you treat them as, or do you genuinely believe them to be objective?
Well, to me, it doesn't matter if, oh, technically they're subjective or if technically they're whatever, because it like it doesn't impact my life unless like positively, I guess, or it doesn't really contribute anything. So I might as well treat both of them as reality.
But if you were to make a claim about, do you think that like even though you treat it as being objectively true, like, do you actually believe? Like, I don't know, I'm interested in your answer.
Well, this is where I think we might fundamentally disagree, because I think yes, I think because everything we experience throughout our world is through human perception, that makes it reality to us. Do you know, have you ever read Meditations of First Philosophy?
I haven't read anything in philosophy. Okay.
Fucking
Okay.
A.
Boring.
Have you heard of Descartes? Like, he's, maybe you've
I've heard of Descartes. Yeah.
Cool.
It's kind of famous.
So he's his famous phrase is
Descartes
basically,
goes
I think, therefore I am.
Haha, good one, Dan. Sorry.
So basically, I know you're not interested in this that much, but I'd strongly recommend reading it. He basically poses
Not
this.
gonna happen. But
It's like
sorry.
30 pages, but go ahead.
Yeah, he basically poses this question of like, okay, what if there's an evil deceiver out there who is just tricking us and tricking all our beliefs and like all our perceptions of everything? Like, what if that's actually the case, you know? And you can kind of replace that with anything. What if we're a brain in a vat? What if we're in a simulation? Whatever. And he ultimately comes to the conclusion that what can never be deceived is technically yourself. You think, therefore you are. And I think somewhat like along those lines. Until I have a strong reason for disbelief to basically not believe in the reality that I'm experiencing, I might as well treat my reality as real.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I agree with that statement. It wouldn't make any sense to not, right? Like.
Yeah. So because I see no distinction between the possible like reality and our perception, I'm basically just rehashing the argument I said before. So yeah, since I don't see any distinction, I treat them both as if they are real.
It just doesn't feel like a satisfying answer. I'm not gonna lie.
Why? Talk to me. Why does it feel unsatisfying? You were on the right track earlier. What were you asking questions about? You had some good ass questions, and then you abandoned them.
I don't fucking know. What was the good ass question? You tell me.
That'd be cheating, wouldn't it?
No, it would be cheating. It just feels unsatisfactory because like it basically comes down to like, oh well, we can just claim anything to be objectively true.
Well,
including morality. Like any morality claim can be objectively true at that point, right? And then how do you disparse between differing differing like morality claims or moral claims? Like do you just say both are objectively true because the person believes it to be, or?
Well, this is why we create frameworks, right? Just as we create a framework to, I don't know, do chemistry and measure scientific facts, we attempt to do the same thing with morality. And it's been done throughout history, and frameworks have been broken down when we find absurd claims within them, and they've been created again. So one example of this is naturalism. And it used to be a belief that a lot of people held, and so it became basically obsolete when its absurdities were pointed out. So in naturalism, people believe that, oh, what is in nature is what is good. which is absolutely ridiculous, right? Like, you can make the argument, well, there's animals that eat their babies in nature. Does that mean that it's good for us to eat our babies? Because that's what you can find in nature. Or, hey, phones don't exist in nature. Should we not have phones? So the idea that these frameworks can never be brought down isn't necessarily true, but it's the idea that we can create logical frameworks where things are objectively true within it, if we agree obviously on our definitions, just like how we would have to agree on like definitions or units of measurement for any science.
Yeah, so that sounds like subjectivity though, right? Like it's true if we all like if we come together and agree for it to be true.
Well, the point is that you might as well treat it as objectivity, right? Like,
well, until somebody else
no
comes with an opposing claim, right?
Yeah,
something that's like in direct
science.
opposition of.
Yeah, just like science. If you, to me, you would either have two claims. You'd either have two positions. You either have the position, well, everything's subjective, so we might as well not believe in anything at all because everything technically be subjective, or okay, like technically, yes, human perception. There's no actually way to prove it, but we might as well treat it as reality, aka like objective, because that's the only way we can get meaningful results.
So how do you choose your framework, your moral framework?
Well, I usually find a person's like values first. I obviously have my own values.
Well, you would. I'm talking about yours, not like others, right?
I'm somewhat utilitarian. So.
Wait, careful. Utilitarian doesn't really give us a statement on what your values are. It just tells us kind of like how to apply said values, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is the framework that I'm using. So my values, I value. Oh, like.
Well, what type of utilitarian then? Like, I don't know what you mean by that.
So utilitarianism basically results to the greatest amount of good to the greatest amount of people. That's
sure.
the very, very basic statement. So Bentham and Mill also like talk about and this is like to use your example of yesterday, the Coon machine. It's the whole idea that all pleasure, or human beings like get pleasure from freedom, and because we should try to like implement that throughout society because it leads to human happiness overall, and we should try to like do what is the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. So my values, I value human happiness a lot. I value stability a lot. I those are my values in mind. So I try to use a utilitarian framework to work with that. I try to say like, okay, if I put this law, how many people are going to be negatively affected by it, and how many people are going to be positively affected by it? And that's a framework I try to use.
No. Sorry.
So why do you choose that framework though? Like, so like you said that because all I got from that was like what you choose to value. You value stability and happiness.
Yes, I mean, I'm not disagreeing that we all have values.
But that really doesn't tell me very much about like how you like what your framework is, right? Like,
well, yes.
We could all go about achieving happiness or stability, quote unquote, in like different ways, right?
Okay.
So.
Let me see how else I can explain this. If I use a utilitarian framework, because my argument for using a utilitarian framework is, well, if you value human happiness, then we should do whatever can bring the most happiness to the most people. So that's a framework I'm going under. Now, let's say you don't value
well, you're
human
saying
happiness.
That just to because you said that you're picking utilitarianism because we should try to bring happiness to as many people as possible, the most happiness to the most people, right? But like that, you're describing what utilitarian is, not why you pick that framework.
Well, no, I'm kind of, or maybe I don't know how else to explain it. So I'm picking that framework because I value human happiness, and I believe that framework is the one that makes the most sense. If I value human happiness, I will want to do what's the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. Does that make sense, or am I still being?
Yeah.
Mm,
So
not
how do you prove? Yeah. So how do you prove a utilitarian to be objective? Or are you just gonna say that like, oh well, if we
Well,
just
this is
agree on
where-
utilitarianism, then it is objective.
Well, that's two. There's two things to say in there. The first one is, again, you technically can't prove it objective, just like you can't prove anything else in the world objective, right? Now we can say it's a framework that makes sense, and we should treat it as objective because logically, if you value human happiness, we should do whatever we can.
Well, that's an
to
ought claim in and of
basically-
itself, right? So how do you
It's-
prove that, right? Like,
Well, it's an ought claim in the sense that I guess like we're creating these values to uphold, but again, that's no freaking different than picking your units of measurement in science, or picking what I guess like thermometer you're gonna use, or anything like that. Like it's just as valid as any of those things.
I feel like it's not, but like I don't know how to argue that it's not. Brian, thank you for the Twitch Prime. That is objectively moral. Thank you.
Good one.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is something I would have to think about.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I feel like you have proven that like even the moral framework that you work in is subjective, right?
Well,
But you're making a claim towards objectivity because you find utility in claiming that it is objective, which I would argue doesn't necessarily mean it is objective.
well, the point is that basically the line gets so blurred, or becomes like so meaningless to just say, oh, it's subjective. Like if you treat everything as subjective, then you basically, you're the ultimate skeptic. Nothing is real. What's the difference between you staying in your room all day or talking to people, or finding a new scientific discovery? There is none.
So,
As long as the only thing I guess that you can kind of 100% prove goes back to like what Descartes said, that you think therefore you are. So as long as your experiences are true, and until you have some sort of stimulus to prove otherwise, you might as well just act as if it's reality.
Yes, quite.
Yeah, all right. I think you've given me a lot to think about. Yeah, this is not satisfactory at all. Like, it doesn't feel very satisfying. But I feel like I get where you're coming from. I
Okay.
don't agree with your conclusions. Fuck.
Ooh.
Yeah, maybe we just have another conversation after I begrudgingly fucking read some philosophy. I don't know.
Listen, I love getting other people motivated in philosophy, and I know you don't like it, but there's beauty in it, okay? Like, think
There's
about
no beauty. That shit makes me wanna like fucking. I can't even say it. Jesus
Okay,
Christ.
that's fine. It'd be like that. Who knows? But maybe you begrudgingly reading some philosophy will get you something to like, or maybe you find something that you find interesting within it.
Wow,
This is
good
the
job.
problem, is that every time I've ever dived into fucking philosophy, I never come away any smarter than I fucking started. I never
You know
feel like I
everything
have,
about
like,
philosophy right now?
No, but I stepped, like, even when I did dive into it, right? Like, I felt like I came out of it no more knowledgeable than I fucking started. I don't know. What do you define happiness as, Pixie?
Oh, that's a really complicated question, right?
A warm
Um,
gun.
So if I had to define happiness, it goes back to the idea of like, what is it? You can either create like a physical argument. You can say like things like dopamine and serotonin. You can talk about economic stability, as well as physical stability. I think that there's a lot of measures that we can use to try to measure happiness. I don't think it's like, for me, I don't know a real way to measure individual human happiness other than asking a person and hoping they're honest. But I think in a large scale, when it comes to humans in general, we do find patterns that repeat themselves when it comes to human happiness. So, like, for example, we know mental illness, which we would classify as bad, like deterring for society, that tends to rise a lot if you're homeless. So if you take that away, then theoretically, by virtue of just not having or not being at risk of mental illness, you're better and therefore, like, I guess, happier.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know how I personally define happiness. I would say that like we can, I think like you said, we can look towards certain things in society that we know creates happiness, generally speaking. Things like, I think you pointed towards economic stability, fucking, I don't know, like social fucking interaction, like I don't know, stuff like that, right? But all right. Yeah, I don't think we disagree too much on what is happiness. But like when you say it's just dopamine, right? That's kind of like why I gave you the Kuhn machine hypothetical, right?
Yeah, I'll admit that I could have argued better yesterday, and I was just very heated because of the first statement that you made, and it all went downhill from there. But I'm happy I was able to explain myself clearer, and that you gave me the chance to explain myself clearer. So I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I try not to be uncharitable. If you feel like I ever am, do like call me out. So yeah.
Wow, good job, guys. It's beautiful. How do you feel, Dan?
Would being uncharitable be something like Rem saying that Steven does the same thing as having anti-vaxxers talk about their position in front of thousands, or is that a good example or no?
That's just Rem being mad. It's just Rem doing Rem things. Are you fucking kidding me? How can I not make it up there?
All right, now Pxie, how much of this debate did you get from Rem?
I didn't get any of it from Rem. Literally look at the VOD. I was like already explaining what my arguments to you were going to be. And he was like, oh, well, I wouldn't argue it that way. I would argue it through this way. And I was like, yeah, I think my argument might be a little bit complicated. And, we kept talking. And then when we came here, I started my argument. And then he was like, oh, I don't think that's the best argument to use, which can be the case. Like, it's a difficult argument, kind of, but it's not like I got it off him. Yeah, like the reason why I was so annoyed also, and I kind of relate to Rem in this, is not I have like mixed feelings now because of like how I was explaining philosophy earlier, because studying this stuff has helped me form more coherent arguments. So when for example, like my Descartes example, there's a lot of things that I would have to sometimes like set beforehand in order to make a proper explanation that I might just completely miss because it's already in my head. You know what I mean? So I understand where Rem was coming from, that my argument might not necessarily be the best one because you have to set it up a lot before, and it was kind of slow. I mean, I kept asking you questions, and I kept, it was like, where the fuck are you going here? But I'm glad I was able to do it.
Yeah. And I was just fucking, I don't give a shit about your conversation with him. I watched most of it, so. All right, yeah. Maybe I'll think about this a little bit and we'll come back. If I care enough to. We'll see.
Okay. I hope you have a good day. Thank you.
All right. Have fun with your stream. All right, later.
Wow, foiled once again, Dan. You stretch in your range of motion daily and you should be okay. Really?
No. know.